Seth Rogen's latest comedy, An American Pickle, is on HBO Max, and I have some very complex thoughts. What do you think, Modern Dan? Well, Vintage Dan, I liked it, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Two Dans, one movie. Well, this should be interesting. Hello everybody, I'm Vintage Dan, and I'm Modern Dan, and we are here to share our thoughts on An American Pickle, which debuted today on HBO Max here in the United States. It'll be playing in theaters in other international markets, and if you don't know what this movie is about, very briefly, Seth Rogen plays both lead roles. The first is Herschel Greenbaum, a Jewish immigrant in New York City who's accidentally brined, sleeps for 100 years, and is reawakened in modern-day New York, where he meets his only living ancestor, Ben Greenbaum, who is an aimless mobile app developer. And right off the bat, can we just say that this premise is absolutely ridiculous? I mean, there's credulity and there's straining credulity, and then there's this movie. Sure, I get it. It's a crazy premise, but that's also one of the funniest things about the movie. The fact that they acknowledge that this is a ridiculous idea and deal with it in a funny way was something that I really, really liked about it. And I was reading an interview with Seth Rogen where he said there are so many classic movies that operate on that same principle. Ghostbusters is a real-world comedy, except you have to acknowledge the fact that there are ghosts in it. Back to the Future is a great comedy. You just acknowledge the fact that they built a time-traveling car. Yes, it's a ridiculous premise. However, there are so many other great movies that are just as ridiculous. All you have to do is grant this one thing that sets up the plot and enjoy the rest of the movie. All right, Modern Dan, I see your point, but let's talk about the look of the movie, because this is one of my biggest pet peeves with a lot of modern films, is that it just looks cheap. It has what I call the streaming look. The lighting is very harsh and bright. It looks like a television show. This is one of the drawbacks to a lot of these movies that you see on these streaming services. I love that they were able to make this film, but at the same time, I think that it looks cheap. It looks like it's not quite ready for theatrical release, and I think it gives a bad look to a lot of these movies and makes them feel less than other movies. Okay, I see what you're saying. However, we are in a new era, and this is one of those low to mid-budget comedies that may not have gotten as much of a wide release without a streaming service like HBO Max. This wasn't made with a lot of money. HBO Max bought the distribution rights earlier this year to put on their streaming service, and it's very possible that it might reach more households than it would have if it hadn't been put in a theater. Usually I wouldn't be making this argument, but there are so many movies that are getting pushed off schedules and unable to find places or homes right now. The fact that An American Pickle is able to have a company that can put the distribution and the promotion behind it at a time when it might not have gotten it isn't a terrible thing. I will agree that I don't like the samey look of a lot of movies that end up on streaming services, but for this one, I'm willing to give it a pass. Okay, I'll grant you that, but let's talk about the structure of the movie, because this was another thing that bothered me a lot while I was watching it. Yes, there are some funny moments, but overall, the movie lacks a little bit of focus. The second act is very long. You have a lot of repeated beats. There's a rise and a fall story, then a rise and a fall and a fall and a rise, and the movie just kind of lurches from thing to thing. I think it feels a little episodic. The plot overall feels pretty weak, and it felt its length, even though it's only just a little under an hour and a half long, I think 89 minutes. Yes, there are some laughs, but overall, it felt a little bit aimless, and I was checking my watch a few times during the film. Yeah, okay, I hear you, but this movie covers a lot of ground in between those beats. I will agree that there are a couple of protracted beats, a couple of what feel like repeat beats. However, inside of that structure, this movie covers a lot of comedic ground. You've got a sentimental family story. You have a flat-out comedy. You have social satire. This funny running gag about the fact that Herschel only knows how to make pickles the old way, but that's now artisanal, and the fact that he can find success doing that. This is a funny joke, and it's a funny premise. There's stuff in here about the tech sector. There's stuff in here about how people can manipulate other people to use their viewpoints and their messages and distort them to use them for their own personal reasons. The fact that, somebody who's saying despicable things can be held up by other people as a hero, and the whole process behind that. There's a lot going on inside the beats of this movie. Could it have used a little bit more of a change up? Maybe a couple of rewrites to tighten up the structure, maybe add a couple more complications just to keep things fresh? Yes, and I will definitely admit that. However, even though it has those repeat beats, I think they cover so much comedic ground that even though it does feel a little bit long, the ending is worth the wait because all of those elements come together in a very sweet and heartfelt way, and it ultimately leaves you with a smile on your face. The journey's rocky, but I think the stuff that's inside the movie makes that journey worth it. Okay, we'll agree to disagree on that, but let's talk about Seth Rogen because he definitely has a big job to do. He is playing both lead roles in this movie, and can I just say, I know I've been a little harsh and a little critical on the movie thus far, but bearded Rogen is a really, really good part of this movie. Seth Rogen, I think, gets pigeonholed, and a lot of it is because he took a lot of these roles as only being able to play one type of character. And he's broken out of that mold with some success, sometimes less successful, like with Green Hornet. He's actually really, really good in this movie as Herschel Greenbaum, this man who's out of time. It's a classic fish out of water story. And yes, some of it is very broad, and some of it is, he's a Jewish immigrant. He doesn't know modern day society. He doesn't, know the language. There are a lot of the easier jokes, but underneath that all, Seth Rogen really does bring a pretty deep well of pain that this character needs, because think about it. He wakes up and he's lost everyone that he's ever known, his beloved wife. He never has even known his own child, his own ancestors. The family plot where his descendants are buried is underneath a freeway overpass. There's a deep well of pain inside this character, and Seth Rogen plays that really, really well. So I give really high marks for bearded, older Seth Rogen in this film, and also big ups for the fact that he insisted on actually having the beard. He didn't want to wear a fake beard because he said that even in big budget movies, it still looks fake. That must have added so much difficulty to the filming of this movie, not being able to just go throw on a fake beard and then take one off to play his younger self, because you got to do all the beard stuff and shave or vice versa. So big ups to Seth Rogen for wanting to add that layer of reality to this movie. What did you think about newer Seth Rogen? Modern Dan? Well, Vintage Dan, I think you definitely got the better of the two Seth Rogens in this movie. Not that there's anything really wrong with modern day Seth Rogen playing Ben Greenbaum, but for a lot of the movie, he's just kind of Seth Rogen. And I know that that is a criticism that's thrown his way a lot. He has a very specific persona, but it's redeemed ultimately by the journey that this character takes. So even though he's kind of aloof Seth Rogen for the first half or maybe 2/3 of the movie, he does bring it around at the end because the movie does have a very sweet story about family at its core and at its heart. However, I was really entertained by the character of Herschel, by the vintage Seth Rogen in this movie. The biggest laughs come from that character. As you mentioned, it is fish out of water, and that can be kind of a played out cliche. However, this is a really adept comedic performance from Seth Rogen, one of the best that he's ever done, and that was my favorite of the two Seth Rogens in this movie. Okay, so I'm a little bit higher on Seth Rogen than Modern Dan is, but he's a little bit higher in just about everything else than I am. We're going to have to come to some kind of consensus. So I propose that we say that this movie is not a great comedy, but it definitely has a lot of appealing elements and a really strong lead performance by Seth Rogen, particularly as Herschel. Okay, sure, but you have to acknowledge that despite its flaws, it's got a lot of laughs, it has a pretty clever screenplay, and it's got some solid performances. So even though it's not a perfect movie, I think it's still a really enjoyable one. I can live with that. It's not the tastiest pickle I've ever had, but I'm not going to send it back. You know what? I can get on board with that. If you want to give me your pickle, I'll take it. Wait. So, when it comes to An American Pickle, we recommend it. Hey, Modern Dan, I don't really know how to do all this outro stuff. Why don't you take care of it? You got it, Vintage Dan. Thank you so much for watching. Please be sure to like, share, subscribe. We're still a growing channel, and it's been so much fun to find new ways to review movies and stuff like that. We've got more reviews coming this month. We're going to be covering the DC Fandom event in a couple weeks here. Lots of great stuff coming up in the month of August. We'd love to have you join us for. And if you want to join me for even more Dan stuff, if you didn't get enough Dan stuff in this video, you could join me at patreon.com/Dan Murrell. We do so much fun stuff every month there, and I want to particularly thank these patrons. These are some of my producer level patrons. It's been so great to meet so many new people. These folks have helped me get on my feet, but really everyone over there has been so instrumental as I've launched this new adventure. So we'd love to see you over on Patreon, and I'm also relaunching my Instagram. If you want to check that out, I'm doing movie trivia, a lot of other fun stuff, interactive stuff for movie fans, and I'm going to be doing a giveaway pretty soon. So if you want to go see what that's going to be about, be sure to check me out. out on Instagram. I am very happy to have done this with Vintage Dan. We will see you the next time that a movie comes out about two ancestors who reunite after one of them is brined for 100 years and then reawakens in modern day New York. But until then, we'll see you next time.